But I've heard pastors say, like, we need to do just 4 songs, and the sermon has to be 27 minutes, and we got to get them out of here,
right?
Because they're not going to want to come back. They're not going to want to come back. And I get that pressure. I've been a part of a church plant for the past 11 years. I've been on staff at other churches that have all felt that pressure. If we don't please the people, they're not going to want to come back. And that's such a hard rhythm to be in.
It is. All right, today we're going to talk about the science behind what makes church so boring. That's a great intro for the podcast. Now, please don't get bent out of shape just yet about this. Here on the Worship Catalyst podcast, we're going to attempt to take a low to medium dive into brain science and understand how God has made us learn, and then apply what we learn to how we plan services. I'm Austin Ryan, and as always, your host. This is Corey Coogan, our guest today.
Pleasure to be back.
Have you ever sat through boring worship services?
Like ones that I've led or have received?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, I've led through boring worship services, hundreds of them.
I have done that myself a few times. I have sat through a few boring ones.
What goes into boring worship services?
I think songs that don't connect are probably part of it, but I think the engagement of leader to the people that you're leading with. If somebody's just staring down and not engaging and not moving, and the bass player is sitting on a chair, and the drummer looks like he's falling asleep.
Right.
And, I think those are contributing because people aren't being, I don't want to say they're being held accountable, but when the band on stage and the worship leader is interacting or engaging eye contact with the crowd, or with the people that are there, the congregation, I think it kind of holds them accountable to be paying attention to what's happening.
Yeah. We're going to talk about that, kind of that energy of the leader and energy of the team here in a couple of episodes later. I remember as a kid being really bored at church. I would sit on the balcony of our church, in the front row of the balcony when I was a kid. I don't know what my age was, but middle school, let's say.
Yeah.
And our carpet was red. Okay.
You remember that over what the songs they were being sang?
Well, I know all the songs are being sang. We sang them all the time. My dad was the music minister, and we sang, it was 100% hymns back in those days.
Yeah.
Piano, organ.
Yep.
But I'm thankful for that heritage.
Sure.
Because I know a lot of hymns.
Yeah.
But I would scrape up this the fuzz from the, I would scrape it up to get the fuzz. It was kind of newish carpet.
Yeah.
And I would sit it on the edge of the balcony railing, and I would go,
and shoot it off,
and then stick my head. Me and my friends.
Poor Miss Edna probably had little.
Yeah, we would aim.
In her
we
hair.
would aim for the white-headed ladies and the bald men.
Esther and Edna.
Yeah,
leaving with red fuzz in their hair.
That's it.
Every time I go to this church, I get red fuzz in my hair.
It was so great. It was one of our favorite things to do. But that kind of highlights. Well, I was in middle school, so that's one thing. But it also highlights a little bit of the fact that it was pretty boring. And so, as I've continued, though. It was boring to me. I'm not, that was my own impression. I'm not going to I'm not trying to badmouth anybody. But I do want to kind of dig in a little bit to what does make a church service boring.
Sure.
But I really want to talk about what makes it enthralling and exciting. Yeah. And for that, I think we need to understand how God made humanity.
Sure.
Okay, so let's just start with the way that God introduces himself to us.
Mm-hmm.
Genesis 1:1. Corey, do you know it? Here we go. Bible drill. Go.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
Okay, so God introduces himself to us
as a creator.
For the very first. That's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
So when you think about the creativity of God, what are some of the things you think about?
Well, I think we had talked offline a few days ago about the Grand Canyon and walking into it. And that the moment that I had that kind of transcended my humanity was looking at this giant canyon and being so blown away by the majesty of who God is and his creation.
Yeah.
So when we're introduced to creation, I look at the complexity of the human eye.
Yeah.
Babies in utero and what they do and how they practice breathing before they even come out. And then the first thing they do is breathe air.
Yeah.
To think that was by accident or not by a master worksman or a creator is foolish in my opinion. And I stand at some of those works and I'm blown away. Some of the most incredible worship services we've ever had has been the ones we do outside, where you look up and you see the clouds blowing over and the trees are moving and the grass is beneath your feet and you feel the breeze. And it's just like, man, God is so incredible and so detailed and so infinite.
Yeah.
And yet we have a relationship with him. and he speaks to us, his creation. Like, why are we so special? Because he's made us that way. Like, he's decided to connect with us as his creation. I mean, even the Bible calls us, the peak of his creation would be mankind, which, how incredibly honoring is that God would call us that he would make us that.
That's amazing, man. So I think about when I think about God's creativity. So I took an astronomy class when I was in college, just to kind of make myself feel small. So sitting on my back porch at my house, you've been there here in Florida. When they do the nighttime launches from Cape Canaveral, you can see the rockets going up, just sitting on the back porch. It's incredible. Super cool.
I don't see that in Buffalo. I see smokestacks sometimes and smog blowing in the air.
Well, they have this struggle to get off the ground, to get out of our gravity, to finally get into space. And it's a big deal to go to the space station or something. To go back to the moon is going to be this gigantic thing. Yeah. And then if we ever figure out how to get to Mars, it's going to be like, nobody's going to even be able to believe it.
No.
And it's like the tiniest little thing. Because when you think about the creativity and the majesty of God, you think about just the Milky Way galaxy has, they think, 200 billion stars or million stars. And then sometimes when you look up at the sky at night and you look at the stars up there, you're not looking at a star. Sometimes you're looking at a cluster of those kinds of galaxies. So, I mean, you might be looking, you're looking at billions of stars sometimes.
And the light that we're seeing is probably
really old.
Controversially, billions of years old.
Like that star was dead long before you got to see it.
And we're watching it right now, and that star might not even be there anymore. But the light that we're seeing takes that many miles, that much time to get to us.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So, and you think about all the different kinds of animals. You think about the sociologists say there's been 107 billion people live on the earth since the beginning of since Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
And then you think about every person has different DNA and different eyes and different things that make them excited and all,
The complexity of our fingertips. Not a single person in creation has the same fingerprints.
And you think about, why would God go to the trouble of making every single snowflake different? I mean, it's just amazing to me.
That's how creative he is.
And in chapter 1, verse 27, Genesis says that we're made in the image of God.
Yeah.
So we're made with that kind of creativity in us somehow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard for us to imagine that it would ever be to that extent, but still, the character of God, his creativity is placed in us as his image bearers.
Yeah.
And I think about that with church services, Corey. And I wonder why we don't express more of the creativity of God in the way that we present God to humanity.
Or we get criticized if we try to.
Yeah. Why do you think that is? Why have we, because you think about the old days, and I don't know what the old days would be hundreds of years ago. It's like beautiful buildings or beautiful paintings or beautiful music pieces or whatever it might be. And then now it's like, okay, we're going to do 4 songs. We're going to preach us a sermon, and we're going to go home. Why have we simplified this and taken away some of the grandeur of the creativity of God?
I think some of it is the pressure to keep people's attention. Our society, because of television and because of the on-demand mentality that we have with everything now as humans. You think before, if you wanted to write a letter and send it to somebody, if you go back to the Pony Express, it would take 2 weeks before they even got the letter, and then 2 more weeks before you heard back from them. Time was slower. Things were paced a little bit differently. In our society, we've sped up. But I've heard pastors say, we need to do just 4 songs, and the sermon has to be 27 minutes, and we got to get them out of here,
right? Because
they're not going to want to come back. They're not going to want to come back. And I get that pressure. I've been a part of a church plant for the past 11 years. I've been on staff at other churches that have all felt that pressure. If we don't please the people, they're not going to want to come back. And that's such a hard rhythm to be in.
It is.
But it's necessary.
Yeah.
But it's hard because we're afraid that if we're not doing it the way that we've done it the last 10 years, because so-and-so family is the big family in the church, and they're used to it being this way, and their grandfather was a deacon who started the baptism service this way. If we don't do it this way, there's a lot of pressure to want to have the consumeristic mentality of a churchgoer being satisfied by the church staff. And I'm not saying that that's a wrong mentality, but I think there's a pressure there to want to do it. And when one way works, as humans, we want to keep replicating that because it gets easier and easier and easier. than trying to change it up every week or make it interesting every week. So it's tough. It's really, really tough. Our pastor has a saying at our church that just because it worked once doesn't mean it's going to work again.
Oh, that's a good phrase.
We have to do it again.
That's a good phrase.
So we'll switch up sometimes we'll do baptisms in the front of the gathering. Sometimes we'll do them at the end. Sometimes we'll mix songs up. But you'd be surprised at how it ruffles feathers when we're normally doing one song, break 2 songs, and we decide to do 3 songs up front.
Yeah.
People are looking at their watches. They're confused. Like, did I miss something? Did I come to the wrong church? So it's tough. It is.
In the next episode, we're going to talk about like some really specific ways to introduce new ways or different ways of sharing the beauty of God or God's word to the congregation. But I want us to kind of look at the science behind this.
Sure.
Okay. And if there's any neuroscientists listening, I just want to go ahead and say,
sorry.
Like this is going to be the non-professional way of describing this. But I have been under the teaching of an educator whose PhD work is in this topic.
Okay.
And so she has, her name's Pam Womack. Shout out to Pam. She has helped me to understand a little bit more about the way that God made us to learn so that our worship services can match up with what God is doing in us rather than just what we want to present.
Yeah.
And so from a really simple scientific standpoint, our brain has, hundreds of millions of neurons in them, right? And neurons have on them these things called dendrites. And the dendrites basically grow as we get older and more information is given. And the way that they grow is that protein grows on there. So I'll try not to get much deeper than that. But basically, when you learn something and you really learn it, protein grows on those neurons and it creates these dendrites, and these dendrites grow and grow and grow. So if you look at the brain, if you look at a telescope or a microscopic view of a brain of a 6-year-old, it's going to be way more cluttered than if you look at a 1-year-old because there's more information that's come in and there's more learning that's taken place, right? Yeah. The same is true on the back end of life. As you have Alzheimer's, dementia, and those sorts of things, those dendrites kind of retreat and they stop connecting and all those kinds of things. So when you, have you ever had one of those moments, Corey, where you're like, maybe you're talking to somebody you're teaching or you're just like driving down the road or whatever, and you have like one of those aha moments where you go, oh, I finally understand, like something you've been working on?
Yeah.
What's going on there is that's a physical thing that took place in your brain. It's not just like you thought of something.
Sure.
What has taken place is because you've thought about it and you've talked about it and you've read about it and you've touched it and you've smelt it and you've really worked on with this topic. Those dendrites have grown together, and you've heard the phrase, obviously, everybody's talked about like the synapses. The synapses are firing. Well, what that is, it's an electric current that takes place when 2 dendrites grow together.
So the epiphany moment is not just a philosophical thing, it's actually a physical thing.
It's a physical thing. The epiphany moment, that's right. So anyway, these things are growing together. Now, what can also happen is they can grow apart if we don't keep doing it. And the perfect example of that for me is Spanish. Okay, so I learned Spanish in school growing up as a kid.
Yeah.
When I grew up in Texas, you had to take Spanish. But I never practiced it. So I would like learn it for the final or the tests that we were taking. I'd learn whatever I had to learn, and then I didn't practice it. I didn't talk to anybody that spoke Spanish, and I didn't want to.
Yeah.
So then the next time I was trying to talk Spanish, I couldn't remember any words, maybe a few. But then I started to go to Mexico and also now Central America pretty often. And so when I'm there for a week and I'm talking in Spanish a lot, then it starts to come back quicker, right? And then the next time it comes back quicker, and the next time it comes back quicker.
It's the riding the bike analogy, right?
That's exactly it. Yeah, it just starts to come. And the reason is because it's there. The protein is there. The information is there, but it just retreats when we don't use it or practice it. Okay, so let's talk about this from worship planning perspective or worship presenting perspective. And this is so simple to talk about because the complexity of this is literally decades of study, right? Or centuries of study. But for us to understand it, I think when we preach a sermon, and I'm just going to use that as an example, the congregation is engaging with that sermon as a learner of how to listen.
Yeah. So you're teaching them not just the information, but you're also teaching them how to receive the information.
The problem is the learning is on how to listen. The learning is not on how to take the information and go live out the information.
Yeah.
Okay? So when you get a really good school teacher, for an example, a really good school teacher is not going to like just sit up there and give a 60-minute lecture.
Yeah.
A school teacher is going to make sure that there's, depending on the age, there's dialogue around the topic.
Yep.
There's additional kinds of ways to learn. There's a video that they're going to watch.
Interactive
There's
pieces maybe. Feel touch.
If they're little
involved,
kids, they're going to make them touch stuff. You know, they're going to cut out an A or whatever it is out of a piece of paper, whatever it might be. And so, because what good educators know is that what they say is not necessarily being learned.
Yeah.
Like there's a difference between presenting something and actually having true learning take place. And the difference is in the dendrites. And the way that those dendrites grow the most is because like, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it's something in the neighborhood of you forget 80% of what you hear in the first 24 hours.
Yeah.
Okay. And then after 72 hours, you really have almost very little left. But if you will listen to something and then you'll relearn it and talk to somebody and you'll connect on it and you maybe have some sort of little assignment, some homework thing, you watch a video, you do this, you do that, and you really work on it, then you can get to the point where you can retain 80% of what you learn, what you hear. But it requires work after the moment.
It does, yeah.
So the way that they talk about this from an attention standpoint, do you have a long attention span?
I think I do.
Focus on something for a really long time?
I do, yeah.
There's
my claim to fame in life.
Yeah, you can just like be dialed in.
Yep, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. You know, they have two different kinds of attention spans. One of them is one of them's an attention span that's like, squirrel, and that attention span's like 6 seconds or something.
Yep.
But then there's something called selective sustained attention. Okay, it's when you're really making a decision, I'm going to focus on this.
Yeah.
But there's two halves of that. There's the half of it or the part of it where you do something. You do it. So I'm going to focus on playing this video game. Okay. Or I'm going to focus on talking to a crowd. You have a 20-minute attention span that you can do it on average in the States. If you make a decision, selective sustained attention, to watch somebody else play a video game, to watch someone else give a speech, that attention span is usually 5 to 6 minutes.
Yeah, so I'm a little shorter than that, yeah.
Now, it doesn't mean that you can't re-engage or anything like that. It just means that every now and then your brain's going to go off onto something else, right? But the funny one is the 20-minute one, because that means if I'm preaching, then at least once every 20 minutes, I lose my train of thought. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like my mind goes somewhere else. And so, but people listening is even worse. So you look at really good communicators. Yeah. Really good communicators are like going every 4, 5, 6 minutes, they have something that's breaking up the rhythm of the conversation. You know what I mean? So it's like they're trying to say something funny, or hey, watch this on the screen, or there's this video, or there's a story, or I'm bringing this person up to interview them, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
There's like a breaking of the pattern going on. Okay, and that comes from this other neurological concept called the oddball effect. Okay. This may be the most boring podcast of all time, but I'm trying to drive to something. So if you'll hang with me for 2 more minutes,
got them for 5 minutes, right?
That's right, exactly. I've been talking for more than that probably, But Corey, if I were to show you the same picture over and over again, like 20 straight times for 1 second, just like picture, like a slideshow. Yep. But then I interjected in the middle of that 1 second of something else. Like I'm showing you a picture of a shoe, 20 shoes, same shoe. Yep. And I interjected a picture of a cat. Yep. You would think in a controlled environment, and we'd interview you, how long was the picture of the cat? You would be like, 2 or 3 seconds long. It was 2 or 3 times longer than the shoe. But it would be the exact same. Why is that? Is because one of the things that God did in our brains is he caused us to take new information and slow it down so that we could take in more. I have several friends who are worship leaders who are police officers. Yeah. And they all say the same thing. They're going through their day, then somebody pulls a gun, and everything slows down. And everything that they've learned, everything that they've processed, comes, and they know that girl's wearing red dress, and that kid's in danger, and this is the kind of gun he's got, and all this kind of stuff. Like all of this comes into play. Yeah. God's made us to slow down the information so we could take in more data when something changes. So, what all of that means, as far as us, like how do we take the neuroscience concept of the oddball effect and apply it to church life? here's the way it happens.
Mm-hmm.
If we do the same things over and over and over and over again, we are biologically forcing people to stop paying attention.
Yeah. And I agree with that wholeheartedly.
And if you and the way we know that's true is how many times have you driven from your house to your church? Hundreds?
Hundreds, yeah.
And do you sometimes get there and you don't remember driving?
Yep.
You're just like, how did I get here?
Yeah. Or I'm going somewhere else and I end up going to the church.
Yeah, right.
My brain just takes me off the exit.
Yes.
I'm like, what am I doing right now? Why am I going to the church? It's Saturday.
I really think God made us that way.
Yeah.
So that we don't have to think about the mundane.
Yeah.
So that we can focus on the
power
new.
Space. Yeah.
And so in church service development,
yeah,
it is important for us to focus on how can we take this age-old reality and truth and present it in ways that will help people go, whoa, like their minds are just alert and connected. And now the synapses are starting to happen because they're hearing it and seeing it and experiencing it and talking about it and touching it and feeling it and all those things, to where all of a sudden true learning can finally take place.
And I think that's why the novelty of some of the worship songs that we sing have those breaks in them. There are certain songs that have, like, I'm thinking off the top of my head right now, like Raise a Hallelujah says, there's that part where it's the kind of call and response part of the church where it says, sing a little louder. And then he waits and the crowd sings back, sing a little louder.
Yeah.
It's like, sometimes that can be novelty, right? You think to yourself, like, why am I doing that? I remember there was a song that I used to do for youth services when I was younger called Deep Cries Out. It was a Bethel worship song. And it has a breakdown on the bridge where it says, go to the left, go to the left, go to the right, go to the right, jump, jump. It's almost like a Christian kind of karaoke dance moment, like cha-cha slide for Christians or whatever those wedding things are.
Yeah.
But we used to do it in a lot of our youth worship nights or our big youth camps that we would do. And I'll be honest, I didn't know the neuroscience then, but when you would do that part, it would change everything up for 30 seconds to a minute. But then the next song we went into, it seemed like every kid was like waiting for the next part of the song. What are they going to sing next? Because of that one change up that we did that was so outside of the realm of worship. It wasn't just sing your songs and lift your hands and close your eyes. It was, hey, we're going to have a little fun and get a little interactive here and kind of shake out the cobwebs and move around a little bit. But it would wake all the kids up and they would be so much more engaged for the next 5 to 7 minutes of the next song. And I think as worship leaders, if we can think of things like that, ways to wake up the crowd a little bit and change things up, the next song or the next opportunity, the next thing will be so much more effective than just sitting back and doing it the same way that we do it every single week. And it's tempting to want to do it that way because it's easy, right? You plan out your service.
Yeah, we do two, 1.
Yeah.
You know, whatever the number thing is,
it makes it easy for me to plan, easy for the pastor to time, and easy for the greeters to know when the next song is happening, and when's the shift change going to happen, when are the kids going to be sent out, when is the offering going to be taken up, so everyone knows how to do it, and it makes sense for an organization to enjoy that rhythm. But for the people coming in, I think it only sets them up, like you said, to be biologically wired to not pay attention, to not care about the next thing. That's why people zone out for announcements, because believe it or not, even though it's new information, they know, oh, here comes the announcements.
Yeah, it's presented the same way at the same time.
Same way, same time. And so we've tried to be creative, and churches have too, right?
Yeah. I feel sorry for the guy or the girl that always has to go up and do the, I really do. So it's like, hey, I'm Pastor such and such from whatever. It's like, everybody's like, okay, whatever. We're not listening to this guy or this girl.
And I get it. I mean, but and churches have tried to be creative with the announcements.
Video, whatever.
Yeah, try to send the most bubbly, loud girl you can get to go up there and be like, hey, everybody. And then next week send up your baritone voiced, middle school pastor or something. I don't know if you have baritone middle school pastors or not, but get them up there and let them talk. But either way, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But I think the idea of understanding how people think and attention spans is not a lost concentration. I think it's actually, if more worship leaders and pastors thought about that, instead of holding people like I don't know what the word would be, but like almost criticizing people for not being able to pay attention, we almost make it a sin thing.
Right.
Like all these people, they don't pay attention because they're not mature enough and they're not good Christians. And a good Christian could listen to the whole sermon. A good Christian doesn't need to be entertained. The Word of God is entertainment enough. Okay, then why do we have lights on in the building? Because a good Christian should be able to walk in the dark and sit down and
or not have a building.
Yeah, why do we need a building?
Right, this is a waste of money.
Yeah, a good Christian should be able to open up the Bible at home.
It's true.
But we know that's not true. Like we know that humanity is always fighting. Our human nature is always waging war against our spiritual nature.
Yes.
And we as leaders try to use the best tools we have to beat back that human nature so that the spirit can be fed. And I think there's nothing wrong with changing up the worship. And there's nothing wrong with changing up how you do church every couple of weeks to make it interesting, because it keeps people on their toes.
That is so well said, Corey. That's really profound, man. I think
my dendrites were firing.
They were. I got you, man. Got you there. You know, in the next episode, like I said, we're going to get really specific on some of those. But man, I tell you, I have taken so many arrows, you know, right to the face from pastors and other leaders who are so committed to really long sermons and things like that.
Yeah.
And let me just be clear, I'm not against preaching a sermon. I mean, we should, you know, that's not the problem. I'm not saying preach it for 27 minutes or 82 minutes or whatever. That's not my point. The point is, in presenting the word of God, you can either be happy with the fact that you preached a really good sermon, or you can be happy with the fact that people actually connected with it and took the information and discussed it and applied it and all that. And I want to be happy with the back end of that.
Yeah.
You know, I don't care if I'm the greatest orator of all time. Yeah. What I want is for those people to go take it home and go their lives be different.
Yeah. And I agree with you. And I feel that same way even with like songwriting. Mm-hmm. If I see a kid leave a youth service and he's humming the melody of a song that I wrote, and it was only a 5-second like little, you know, poppy kind of worship song, as opposed to my big, long poetic song that has all this really rich theology that I love.
Yeah.
I feel more connected with that child who's leaving, singing that little song, because I know something I wrote, something that I created, connected with him.
So good, man. So, that's great. All right, next time, let's go deep on this bunch of little ways to be different. Ways to be different.
It'd be awesome.
I hope that was helpful, guys. And please, feel free to attack us and kill us on this concept. God made us this way.
You can reach me at austinryan.
Well, God made us creative, probably for a lot of reasons, but for sure He made us that way so that we would show the world His beauty. So let's agree just to be more and more creative as we plan services and honor Him. All right, thanks for joining us today for the Worship Catalyst podcast. Next week, like I said, we're going to talk about 19 creative ideas for your services. Yeah. And we're gonna get out of just the brain talk and actually help you put onto paper some things that you can do to help you be more creative in your services. So see you in 2 weeks.